Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Hello and welcome to Movies vs. Capitalism, an anti-capitalist movie podcast. I'm Frank Capello.
And I'm Rivka Rivera.
Riv, how you feeling? You just got back from a little trip. I wouldn't call it a vacation because it sounds like it was more of a work trip than anything.
No, it was definitely a vacation. It was fun. But since we're both from LA, I feel like, when you travel and you see a bunch of friends, you're exhausted after. It was very fun, but you can even hear it, listeners, my brain is a little delayed. I'm a little jet lagged, but then we're going to London in 2 days. Tommy and I, we're going to see, because Harvey K let us know about it, the theatrical production of Grapes of Wrath, which I'm really excited about with one and only Cherry Jones.
Cherry Jones, that's right. I'm sure that'll be a great production, I have to imagine.
It's supposed to be amazing. It's at the National Theater, and if it comes over here, I'll have seen it for cheaper over there, across the pond.
Is this the same version that Steppenwolf had put up originally? Is this that same adaptation, as far as you know?
Great question. I have not done that much research.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe someone can write in and let us know. We're not going to Google it, but we did have one thing that we wanted to talk about today before we get into our movie conversation. Something that thematically lines up very closely with the Marx Brothers film Duck Soup. We're talking about Blake Lively. This was actually something that I had kind of been hearing about, but didn't really know a ton about, but you were the one that's like, this is a story, we got to talk about this.
It's all over my Instagram feed and my TikTok feed and For You page. Yeah, if it's not all over yours, good for you. Apologies if now it is, because your phone knows that you're listening to us talk about this.
Mm-hmm. But walk us through it, because I think you have a firmer grasp on the story than I do.
Yeah. This will be funneled through my jet-lagged brain, so let's see how I do. But essentially the context is there was a book written by a novelist, Colleen Hoover, who has her own controversy in the past with taking certain themes and making them romanticized. But this novel, regardless, was very popular in 2016, and it deals with domestic violence, DV, abuse, and like lots of complexities of these kind of relationships.
And this is It Ends With Us, right? That's the name of the book.
It Ends With Us, which is now a movie. And the rights for the book were bought by Justin Baldoni, which, I don't actually know too much about him other than I know he has a podcast where he's sort of centered as like a feminist male. Again, this is just very basic, not in depth.
Okay.
But I think our conversation, I'm not actually so much interested in these personalities and who's right, who's wrong, like the gossipy details, even though that is certainly what my For You page is interested in. But I think there's a bigger anti-capitalist theme here. But let me finish giving you context. So bought the rights, then brought on Blake Lively, who, if you don't know who that is, she was Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, then
Gossip Girl,
long blonde hair, married to Ryan Reynolds. So she became a producer and also the star of the film. He's directing, they act opposite each other. All of a sudden, the marketing for this movie begins and people are like, why aren't they doing marketing together? There seems to be a divide between Blake Lively, Colleen Hoover, and Justin Baldoni. That kind of whatever the drama is between them aside, because I really don't know much and don't so much care. What's been really fascinating has been the way in which a film that is about domestic violence has been marketed to the general public, particularly from Blake Lively and Colleen Hoover and that marketing team. Specifically, it was kind of going around this clip of her saying, bring your girlfriends, wear your florals, also buy my hair care line. There's just been all this marketing with no, you wouldn't even, I had no idea until I dug deep that this was a film with themes of domestic violence. There's no trigger warning attached to it. Oddly enough, they don't even have, apparently, any numbers to call, like domestic violence hotlines at the end. Jeez. Or even trigger warnings at the beginning. So you're going to this film, maybe having seen this marketing, thinking, as honestly I did, oh, fun rom-com, wear your florals, bring your girlfriends, and you get brutally triggered. And whatever levels of DV you've experienced in your life or even been around, I believe that requires a trigger warning. I personally as an audience want to know what self-care I need to walk into a film with or out of, or how to prepare myself for something like that. And I think the bigger picture is what we're seeing is such an alienation from the artistic content themes of a film and what happens when you need to market. because it's a commodity at the end of the day and there needs to be money coming in. And the role of an actor like Blake Lively embodying this character, haven't seen the film, don't know how she does in terms of that, but like this deep separation of like whatever that process was, whatever that character was, and then just like totally marketing, commodifying this, not talking about the subject, selling hair care products, just like get people to the theaters. That's your job. It says a lot about the role of celebrity in late stage capitalism, and also the reaction, I think, says a lot about the general population's distrust, disdain, and like over it they are with celebrity culture. So that's kind of, I think I did pretty good considering my brain feels a little fried from the LA sun, but that's the context.
Yeah, that was very good. The only things I'll add, and I did watch a TikTok that you sent me explaining the entire story. So like as this film is premiering and as they're marketing it, Blake Lively is also simultaneously at these film events also trying to sell her alcohol brand.
Oh, also the alcohol brand? Jesus.
Yes, the alcohol brand, which is called like Boozy Girl or something. I forget. It's got some bullshit name. But they like did these activations at, I don't know if it was the premiere or if it was like different screenings, but it ends with us themed cocktails.
Oh my God.
And some of them had, like, one of them had the name of the guy who is the abuser in the film. I mean, but that is particularly egregious because according to that TikTok, like, alcohol is involved in 90% of domestic abuse cases.
That's horrific.
Yeah, and is just completely detached, like you said, alienated. Blake is alienated from, I don't know, like, not only the subject matter of this film that she chose to like become the executive producer of and champion through, being alienated from the actual subject matter to the point where she feels like this is a good time to try to peddle her own wares, specifically alcohol. And then there's the hair care products that you said as well. But yeah, it's a complete detachment and misread of, I don't know, your responsibility as an artist and a storyteller, especially if it's such sensitive subject matter that affects so many different people around the world. I mean, if this was just like a random ass rom-com, you know, like Blake Lively and so, or just a couple of star-crossed can't get their shit together and fall in love, like, go, you know what? Do your alcohol activation, do your hair care tie-ins, like sell whatever your bullshit. I still kind of think it's a little gross, but like at the very least, you're not entering into this space that is supposedly to discuss and portray this very serious subject matter, and then you're using it as an opportunity to commodify the other aspects of your life and then commodify and market the film itself. And yeah, and also was seeing a lot of stuff that like in all of her interviews, her press tour, no real mention of domestic violence, no real mention of like what the film is actually about. So there are apparently now also people going into the film thinking it is a rom-com and then walking up being like, oh, that's a film about domestic violence.
Yeah.
Wish someone had told me.
Yeah. It fucks up your life to be re-traumatized like that. It has real world impact. It's so fucked up.
Very fucked up. And this is just such a standout example of how late stage capitalism warps everyone's brains, is that like, don't get it twisted. There were probably, I don't know what, 20, 30, 40, 50 people between Blake's team, her alcohol company, the movie's marketing team, all of these people who all collaborated on this, and not a single person was like, hang on, maybe we don't do this.
I bet you someone did. And I think this is the part that I really have to like separate. Okay, there's the personalities, there's like the individuals that are so easy to like, believe me, I've gone deep on the interviews from both actors. It's like so easy to get caught in the personalities of like, God, they're just such bad people. They're so annoying. They're so this. But I bet you people did suggest many like brilliant ideas. For example, I even heard like a creator be like, why wouldn't they even just say like, okay, maybe it's you do the wear your florals, but connect it to like, you know, come to the theater and you'll find a QR code connecting to these domestic violence places you can donate money. Or even with her hair care, we're going to donate this amount of money to like women's shelters, anything. Yeah. My guess would be, because I kind of think people are very smart, I would tend to think many people, you're right, like on those teams, people probably said something. It's not in capital's interest. Like if you think about it, I'm sure ultimately what it came down to was like, sure, but it's probably more people will go if they don't know that the theme is domestic violence. And we just want people to buy tickets. So let's market this as a rom-com. because it makes more sense for capital. And I think it's that simple. Like, and I think ultimately, I'm sure people were like, that doesn't make the most money, so sit down and shut up, because we're here to make the most money possible. And that's that at the end of the day. Possibly even Blake Lively herself.
Honestly, you're probably right. You're right. Someone probably raised it. And what we know is that the system does not incentivize thoughtful, compassionate decisions for the betterment of the audience and the society. It's rarely ever what is incentivized. What's incentivized is, like you're saying, sell these fucking tickets, sell this fucking alcohol, sell these hair care products, like move the product however we can, whatever we need to do, at the expense of any people that walk into this theater and are, completely triggered by this experience that they didn't even know that they were walking into.
Yeah, it's really sad.
It's really sad. But like you were saying, the backlash has been so much so that it really seems like I feel like we're turning a corner in America where like celebrity worship, billionaire worship, wealth worship, lifestyles of the rich and famous. I think sure, that culture still very much exists here, but I think we're turning a corner in that like the masses are starting to get wise and be like, actually, I'm completely not interested in this. Not only am I not interested in this, I like actively resent it and these people and the people who perpetuate this kind of like corrosive, toxic culture. So that's, I guess, a little heartening in moments like this.
Yeah.
And it could just be that it's like that's the side of the internet that we're on, so we're just like in the echo chamber. But
no, I think it's like I think there's a popular opinion that there's a sense that there's something askew, and that's why I think creators who can. When I see a video of a creator who's really put thought in this and like frames it in a way that gives a broader context for the systems that we're living in, so it doesn't just become, oh, they're really just a shitty, horrible person. Mm-hmm. So people can take that kind of vague feeling and like be educated on as to why. Like these are always just we talk about this all the time. Like it's such an important moment, so you can be like, so that thing you're feeling, don't get caught up in the like, well, Justin Baldoni's a fucking asshole, or Blake Lively she's so annoying, she's so stuck up. We turn on her and we hate her now. She's not the issue, and he's not the issue ultimately. This system that is just whoever's going to be in their shoes sort of has to play the game. Mm-hmm. That's the issue.
Yeah, I personally don't give a shit about either of them. Like as people or like their individual decisions. Like you're saying, I like when you told me this story, I was like, oh, none of this is surprising to me.
Now your algorithm will think you do. So sorry about that.
It's fine. I welcome it. I welcome more conversations about celebrity culture into my algorithm. But that was it.
That's it. Keeping it short and sweet.
Yeah. So now let's move to our conversation about a film from 1933, Duck Soup. But before we do, just want to remind our audience that we here at Movies vs. Capitalism do not sell ads on this show. We donate our ad space to leftist and progressive organizations. Instead, we rely completely on community support to keep the show going. So if you want to do that, you can subscribe to our Patreon.
That's right. That's for just $5 a month. You get access to new bonus episodes. We just did one on natural born killers, which was pretty great. And you also get access to our entire back catalog of bonus episodes. And if you're interested, our Patreon link is in the episode description in your podcast player, or you can find it at mvcpod.com. Also, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast on your podcast player so you don't miss new episodes.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're right back with Branson Reese discussing Duck Soup. Sometimes the problems of the world feel overwhelming, like there's nothing we can do. That's why we want to tell you about Ember Cooperative, a group dedicated to breaking down the challenges we face into meaningful actions we can do in our daily lives. They highlight ways that we can all think and do differently to shift norms and forge a more humane future.
For example, the Ember Co-op team recently analyzed the racist and politically motivated war on drugs, which has ruined countless lives and devastated entire communities. Their action guide includes ideas such as hosting a living room conversation about the intersection of addiction and incarceration, supporting reality-based drug education at your kid's school or in conversations with young people, or if you are the 1 in 4 U.S. workers licensed or certified for your work, advocating for fair chance licensing. You can read the full guide at ember.coop.
For their next project, Ember is addressing the need for more diverse forms of activism beyond just signing petitions and donating money. You can follow their work at ember.coop, or if you'd like to get involved, you can apply to join their team. Add your skills to this small think and do tank where you'll have equal say in what they do and how they do it.
Learn more at ember.coop. That's ember.coop.
Today, we are joined once again by our dear, dear friend, Branson Reese. Branson is a comedian, writer, and illustrator. His book of comics, Hell Was Full, is available wherever fine books are sold. He's the co-creator of the D&D podcast, Rude Tales of Magic, and he's also the creator of the animated series Swan Boy on FX. Branson Reese, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me. It's always good to see you guys. I was just thinking while you're doing the intro, the last time I was on this show, you read my intro and it was like hilariously out of date.
Yes.
And as soon as you started reading the intro, I realized I haven't fixed any of my details publicly. I think they still say I like live in like Washington, D.C.
Keep it mysterious.
Branson is a 17-year-old high school student.
It did say originally from Virginia, which I was like, okay, that's a, like weird flex, but all right. But I think the last time it said Brooklyn based, which you no longer are, sadly.
That's
you
true.
are
That's true.
now Los Angeles based. How is LA these days?
Oh, it's great, dude. I'm gonna die here. I love it. That was like my first thought. We got off the plane and the weather was nice, and I was like, I'm set. I'll just age and die here. This is all. I'm set.
I mean, you look LA rocker. I know no one can see you because they're listening to us, but you have a great pair of shades on. Like, you look like you'll die in LA.
Yeah, Branson's got tinted shades on.
Thank you so much. I hurt my little eyeballs every time I go outside.
You mean your large eyeballs?
Yeah, my huge. Well, that's the thing is there's more of them for the sun to hit, So
Exactly.
I gotta be really careful.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a bit, or do you have eyeball pain frequently?
Constantly. I have constant my eyes are huge and they don't work right, and I can't see without lenses with like more than like an inch in front of my face. Yeah, it's bad news, and they just like burn up in the sun. But I'm not complaining.
So we're going to jump right into this, Branson, because this is a film you told us right before we started recording, inside and out. So I'm really eager
That's Babe Ruth pointed to the outfield on that one. Let's hope I don't strike out.
When I told Branson he could choose off menu, because when we book guests, we send them a list of movies that they could potentially choose from, while also saying you can choose off menu. And Branson immediately was like, I want to talk about duck soup. So here we are.
Pull in the duck soup off menu. So yeah, here we are. This classic is directed by Leo McCarey, written by Bert Kalma, Harry Ruby, Arthur Sheikman, and Nat Perrin, starring the Marx Brothers, Groucho, Chico, Harpo, and Zeppo, along with Margaret Dumont, Raquel Torres, and Louis Calhern. We couldn't find the budget for this film, but we know that it made about over $100,000 $100.
See, the thing you gotta understand about the early 30s is this movie was made for several nickels and it returned tens of dollars.
Although we do know, and we'll talk about it, I did read that, it was the Depression and the studio was having a very hard time financing films. So I think there was a lot of stress around making this, and that led to some conflict between the Marx Brothers and the studio. But it did make about a little over 100,000 worldwide, roughly 2.5 million adjusted for inflation, and
So still not successful.
It's pretty bad. Like, you'd think that would adjust out to like way more.
I was doing the inflation calculator and I was like, this has to be at least $80 million. And then it came to 2.5 and I was like, damn.
Nah, man, it's like the Velvet Underground of movies, though. Nobody saw it, but everyone who did started a brother-based comedy act.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think famously it's like not much of I wouldn't know if you would say this was a plot-driven movie, but here's a short...
I would if I was stupid. Yeah, no, it's absolutely not a plot. It is a jokes-driven movie.
It is a bit-driven movie for sure.
The plot of most Marx Brothers movies can be summed up in one word, I think, for the most part. The coconuts, it's... maybe it's a compound word. I would say either real estate or Florida.
Yeah.
I'll go through monkey business. The plot is boat. Okay. Horse feathers. The plot is college. Night at the Opera. The plot is opera. And Duck Soup is my favorite Marx Brothers movie because the plot of it is nation.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's it. It's literally just like the Marx Brothers invade an idea. That's like the plot of all, like they invade a boat, they invade college. This is they invade a nation.
That's so good. That's brilliant. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give a little bit more context, but that's That's absolutely true. So in this movie, when Rufus T. Firefly is named the dictator of the bankrupt micronation Fredonia, he declares war on neighboring country Sylvania over the love of his wealthy backer, Mrs. Teasdale, while also contending with two inept spies who can't seem to keep straight which side they're on.
That's it. That's like more plot. That's even like, that's like Wikipedia, like wringing plot out of a completely dry towel, you know?
Yeah.
A little bit of historical context for when this film came out. As Rivka mentioned, it was the Great Depression. This film was released on November 17th, 1933. America is knee-deep in the Great Depression, and roughly 25% of the nation's workforce are unemployed. On January 30th, Adolf Hitler is appointed the Chancellor of Germany. And then on March 4th, Franklin Delano Roosevelt is sworn in as the 32nd President of the United States and immediately begins rolling out New Deal policies and programs to combat the economic turmoil in the country. Flash forward, in November, the United States and the Soviet Union establish formal diplomatic relations, and in December, the 21st Amendment goes into effect, repealing prohibition. So the official end of the Roaring Twenties, everyone can drink again.
Wow.
So a very transitional year in American history.
It's sort of a perfect spot for comedy if you think about it callously, as I do. Like, everyone's out of work and it's legal to drink again. Mm-hmm. Buddy, I'm laughing. You know, if I'm a guy, if I'm just like an average guy off the street in 1933, I don't have to go to work. I probably want to, but I don't have to. And I can go to a bar without getting hassled by the cops. I'm looking to laugh.
But oddly, this is so interesting because from what I read, the little bit I read of research I got to do, it didn't seem like people were really laughing. Like, it was a mixed vibe. The mood was not fully there yet.
In 1933?
Yeah, it sounds like when this film came out.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
being completely facetious. Yeah, there was a Great Depression on. People were like, the suicide rate was extremely high.
But I also truly believe, Branson, that if you were there, you'd be laughing.
I've thought about this a lot. I think I personally, not like not man, you know, but me, individual.
Yeah.
I could be a guy like on a push cart, you know, with like another criminal on a chain gang. Like, I think I could be doing pretty well in the Great Depression. No offense to anyone who died in the Great Depression, but I'm built different. I think I would have been okay.
So, Branson, the first thing we start the conversation is, why did you want to talk about duck soup on an anti-capitalist movie podcast?
Well, the thing, I was going to be talking about it anyway. You know, like, we could have brought... I looked at Repo Man. You know, I looked at the list, and I was like, I got really close to doing Repo Man, another favorite of mine, but I was like, I'm going to want to talk about... So, let me go back. I think the first time I saw Duck Soup, I was probably 5 or 6. I was like a little kid. My dad showed it to me. You know, he would show me like movies from the 30s, like this and like King Kong.
You didn't seek it out on your own?
No, I didn't know to seek it out. It just would be, he'd like see, you know, he'd be like, oh, you should watch this one. You know, he'd just be like, because a little kid, he was like, oh, you're sort of an asshole. You should watch Groucho, who's like an adult asshole. You know, like you might, you might like this. And he was right.
Wow.
And so I've seen it like 100 times. You know, I just like watched it constantly as a little kid. We'd rent it. And I think we bought it at one point, you know, and then I'd watch it in high school. I love this movie. And it's like, to me, it's a no-brainer that this is an anti-capitalist movie. And as soon as Frank was like, Duck Soup have politics, I was like, oh yeah, I should defend this instead of just having it as like an internal thought. But I think it makes a lot of sense because it is about, first of all, the Great Depression like hangs heavy over most of the Marx Brothers. Their first movie, The Coconuts, comes out in 1929. Everything else comes out after the fall of Wall Street. And so a lot of their early stuff and their big successes, Wall Street had just fallen. There was a sense in America that our betters, you know, like the people up above, like sort of dictating how we're going to live, they don't know what they're doing. We don't trust them. And the Marx Brothers really speak, they have an extremely like anti-authoritarian bent to all of their comedy. They are not, this sounds so like, so like pejorative, like I went to college, but like, you know, a guy like Chaplin or Buster Keaton or Harold Lloyd, the sort of earlier guys, they have a very like humanist bent to them, right? It's about like an individual like struggling and trying, and you root for this guy. Whereas the Marx Brothers they are like forces of chaos. They are almost like divine punishment on the upper class. Like, it's no longer about poor people trying to survive. It's about these freaks who exist by different rules of nature getting divine, like, justice on rich upper class people. That's why Margaret Dumas is just, like, terrorized by these men constantly. Like, if I was Margaret Dumas, I wouldn't have agreed to do these movies. You know what I mean? But, like, but she is, like, a rich person who is just, like, terrorized by them all the time. This movie in particular is about wealthy people dealing with consequences that they sort of like. Groucho treats rich, powerful people, and everyone in this movie, the same way that rich and powerful people treat the people beneath them. He is rude to them. He's flippant to them. He doesn't care if they live or die. He declares war. I mean, he declares war in this movie. Fredonia goes to war in this movie for what I would conservatively call no good reason. It's not even that he's like offended. It's like he's like at a party and starts insulting a guy, and the guy's like, "Excuse me?" And he's like, "Well, I'll have you know this means war." Like, nobody gets insulted by me, but from like, it's nonsense what he's doing. And I think in that sense, it is sort of a reflection of what was actually happening to people. And I think for people who the Marx Brothers clicked with and connected with, it was very it's certainly for me, it's a very powerful thing to be like, it's that sort of like, yeah, burn the whole fucking thing down kind of vibe that they have. I mean, I think of them in like Monkey Business is like a really clear example of this, right? They are running from security on the boat that they're stowaways on. In a Chaplin movie, he is trying to get away. He's always running from security or the cops or something. He's trying to get away to survive. The Marx Brothers are trying to get away because that's the funniest thing to do in the moment. And in Monkey Business, they come across a band who is playing, and they think, oh, we'll pretend to be the band. That's how we'll hide from security. But none of them play instruments in that moment. They play instruments later, but in that moment, all of them are bad musicians. It immediately sounds terrible, and it not only do they get caught, but they alert security as to where they are because they're making a lot of noise. That is like the difference between like a Buster Keaton or a Charlie Chaplin and the Marx Brothers, who aren't trying to survive. They just do survive because they're just, I hate the word chaos. It's very overused, but like, it applies to these guys.
I mean,
you know?
yeah, this is, yeah.
It felt like anarchy to me. I mean, it felt like the development of anarchy, and it's really interesting the point you're making that they proceed and build upon the legacy of Chaplin, but they're also in the era where they're breaking into non-silent films, you know, breaking into the talkies and transcending in that format, but they're also reflecting a different political tone and using the fact that they can speak and, you know, have all of this access to that is pretty remarkable. But I too feel like I love the chaos, the absurdity that I think it's like the marriage of being able to use, to me, Groucho Marx is all language. I couldn't imagine him in a silent film. Like, it doesn't work, but then you have Harpo and you have the other brothers who are so still kind of carrying on the silent film. I know, I might bring
and the rest.
And the rest.
Well, we don't really need to know Zeppo's
Chico,
name.
Zeppo.
Chico, yeah.
Yeah, you
It's
do.
interesting. I think about this because you're right. It's like Groucho is tailor-made for the dawn of the talkies, right? He's like, nobody talks more. To this day, nobody talks more in movies than Groucho Marx does. Like, that is... They're talking. He is talking a lot. Everything he does, it's all verbal. One-upsmanship.
It's totally verbal. Yeah.
And a lot of it's nonsense too. A lot of it is like sort of absurdism, right? Chico is doing the same thing, but in a more like anti-immigrant way. It's more. He's like, hey, aren't these new? We've noticed a lot of Italians have come to America. Aren't they ridiculous? Like, that's like the sort of like vibe of that's a very uncharitable read on what Chico's doing. But you know, like, he's doing a lot of Chico's stuff is like misunderstanding of language, right? It's
Yes.
Like Chico isn't he's not as intellectually capable as Groucho. So like a lot of his humor comes from like you're saying, these misunderstandings or like getting words wrong. But whereas Groucho is like I am the verbose intellectual.
Exactly. And then Harpo is a silent film character.
Yeah, and it's amazing that they have that. They play off that gradation, and that is like reflective of the transformation that the culture and that film is moving through, and that they kind of capture that in all of them working together.
And then Zeppo And nobody likes Zeppo, and I don't love Zeppo. And all I ever hear, by the way, everyone always talks about how Zeppo is the funniest off-screen. They're like, oh, yeah, actually, the real funniest one was Zeppo.
Oh, you got to get Zeppo at a party.
Whoa, how fucking convenient, Zeppo. You always, as soon as the camera's turned off, you got real funny, I'm sure. I'm sure he was funny.
He's just the hot one.
Yeah, he's the hot
I think everyone's just giving him too much credit because he's hot. They're like, have you heard how funny this guy is? And
being the hot Marx brother is so like, that's like, you look normal.
Yeah.
But I do like Zeppo because he is like, he's almost their foot in the door of society. You know, he's there, like, he can pass, you know, he can have a romantic subplot. And even then, he's skewed. He's like a weird romantic lead. You know, he's still like a strange guy. And I also, if you look at their post Paramount movies without Zeppo, they're not as funny. I don't think, this is very, people don't like when I say this. I don't think Night at the Opera is anywhere near as funny as like Duck Soup or Monkey Business. And I think it's very funny. I just don't think it's as funny. And I think part of it is they are no longer antagonistic forces. Like in Night at the Opera and Day at the Races, they're helping people. And it's like, what? I don't want to see the Marx Brothers help people, you know? It's, I don't, it's not as much for me. But with Zeppo, they are sort of this like bizarre foursome who keep invading different spaces and like just collapsing them around themselves.
I love that framing, especially when you related it back to, you know, like Chaplin and Keaton. Early on, we did Modern Times for the podcast.
Great movie.
Fucking unbelievable movie. And it was my first time seeing it, but you're right. It's very much the story of an individual trying to survive these systems. And sometimes he makes active choices as far as like advancing the plot or, you know, like where he's going to go next and everything. But it does feel still more reactive to the plot and the surroundings, whereas, as you're saying, these guys are just like showing up and unleashing pure chaos. Another word that comes to mind is irreverence, which is like one of the, again, another like bullshitty kind of hoity-toity word, but it's like there's a real complete lack of respect for authority, for norms, for high society that I really appreciated watching in this movie. And then watching them, and I think you already said this once, like once these guys are assuming these roles of power, like being the leader of a country or the secretary of war, what they're doing in the context of this comedy, you're like, well, that's ridiculous. They're not taking any of this seriously. They're just like treating people like cannon fodder. But that's what a lot of people in power do. Like a lot of people in power don't actually have much care or respect for the people that they're actually, you know, supposedly supposed to be like ruling over in good faith. So I felt like maybe I had to reach for the satire a little bit, but like once I was there, I was like, okay, I see what we're getting. Because also at the same time, it's like these three guys are like, they look fucking ridiculous. You know, like everyone, like everyone else is wearing like period appropriate costumes. And then you have these three guys like dressed like they just came out of the circus. So there's like, you have to like, at least for me, I was like, I have to suspend disbelief and be like, okay, let's pretend that these are normal men which is a big ask. Which is a big ask. Like if you didn't walk into a room with these guys, you'd be like, what the fuck is wrong with the three of you guys?
Yeah. And I'd look at Zeppo too. I would say, what the fuck is wrong with the three of you guys? And I'd look at Zeppo and say, and you should know better. Yeah. You're wearing a suit that's period appropriate, so you're not off the hook either. That guy's got grease paint. He just took 3 things of grease paint to his face. They've got a very, you know, it's like Chaplin, like a lot of his films ask the question, like, how will I survive this? Like, how will I get from one day to another? And the Marx Brothers ask the question, how do you like it? You know, it's like to the people doing that, it's like, well, how do you like it? How would you like it if somebody came in here and did that? Because you're right. It's like Groucho in this, he behaves pretty much the same as any world leader at any point in the 20th century, except he has the good grace to tell jokes while he's doing it. You know, it's like fucking at least he does that.
Yeah, he's like Trump in that way.
I mean, yeah, that to me was the immediate connection. I felt like that was the obvious, like I'm sure that's how this is talked about a lot. There were a lot of articles written that I found, making the connection between like, this is Trump. Although I will say the setup, while sparse, I think is really important. And I think a lot of that is probably credit to, I read there was credit to Leo McCarey, was very like conscious of making some of this political critique, but the fact that they set it up where Mrs. Teasdale is this wealthy elite woman who is just basically picking who she wants to put in place because she has the money. That's all you need to know about this world to understand why we're down for the anarchy, because that is the most absurd thing. Actually, that kind of trumps all the absurdity.
Yes, yeah.
And it's the first thing that happens. So nothing can beat that level of absurdity that this, in Freedonia, where you're supposed to be living a free world, elections are bought and sold, and the real dictator is the wealthy. So because that's all that's set up immediately from the top, we're on the side of even Groucho Marx's character. You know, we're just like, anything that's ridiculous makes sense because it's exposing how ridiculous the system is. It's kind of like how the world now, you have these experiences more and more where if I even want to write something, I don't know if you feel this, Branson, like in satire, if I'm even like trying to write satire, I'm like, what's the fucking point? Like everything feels so absurd that the second you write something, reality outdoes it. You know, like how do you catch up?
Yes, it's a terrible feeling. And that's something I like about this movie is it doesn't feel, and it's very easy to like give into despair when you're trying to like do something satirical, right? Where it's like, well, fuck, I can't beat reality on this. Somebody dumber than I can even imagine is going to get their hand on the wheel of power and drive us into a cliff. Mm-hmm. Every day that happens.
Every day.
And it's very easy to then just like start thinking a little and start spiraling and get it. And a movie like this is, I don't find full of despair. I mean, even though there's like a massive war is declared arbitrarily in it, it's like it doesn't feel hopeless, you know. It's like the dawn of Hitler was like happening while this, you know, like that's and it's not a despair filled movie. It's still a like fuck you kind of thing. And it's like I find that very inspiring about this movie.
Tell me more about that, because I did feel a bit of despair, and this might be my constant push pull with like, sometimes I'm really into anarchy and I feel like, yeah, let's just blow it up. Fuck it. Because it's just like everything's absurd. Let's laugh till we die, which I'm down for. But I do find like what I did find watching Modern Times are just more of the Chaplin films. Like there was more hope there for me, or at least like a horizon, which to me, I always struggle with the desire to blow it all up and burn it all down, but then what, you know? And I'm finding more and more in my personal politic, like I have to have a hope in strategy. Like there is possibility, and YOLO isn't necessarily like, could be a little bit, you know, like you only live once, so pull out your cigar. Like, I don't know, but tell me more about the hope you find.
Well, it's a little, I mean, you have to draw the line too between political anarchism too and like comic anarchism, which are like two different things. Like political anarchism is like, that's going to constant meetings about like, is selling cornflakes at our co-op immoral, you know, like that's one thing. And then there's like comedy anarchism, which is like, it's no, wow, which one do I prefer of those two? And like, to me, what I find very hopeful about it is it's very, very, very close. And obviously Groucho was like, and of course I was going to talk about this. There is a lot of connection between him and Bugs Bunny, right? With the like, of course you realize this means war. Where it's the thing I wanted to do, which was just by nature of finding out that there are people in power above me who make decisions that affect my life, and I can vote, but I don't really get much of a say in what they do or how they operate. That as a little kid pissed me off. And so I want, you know, you want to fucking take them down, and you want to throw a snowball at the president's top hat and knock it off. You know, you want to do it. And it's that realization of like, oh, we are at war, and but whether or not it's stated, they're at war with me, which means I'm at war with them, which means gloves are off, and now I can sort of be the person I wanted to, you know, that thing inside of me that I wanted to come out at like an attack power with. It's good to go. It's okay to do, you know, that sort of like, hey, it's okay. You know, you're off the hook. You're allowed to do what you really wanted to do. I get that big time in the Marx Brothers. And to be honest, and this is a little bit of a stretch, but I do find there is a similar emotional wavelength occurring internally when I do that. And when I am involved in like a direct action thing, there is this sort of sense of like, yeah, fuck you. Like that is it's always how I'm approaching any sort of like direct action I'm involved in is, yeah, fuck you. You can't stop me. Fuck off.
Yeah. It's like, so the hope kind of comes from a validation.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I get that. Because it does feel good to watch. And you're like, it's not just because I'm laughing hysterically. There is something. And I wonder if that validation and reflection is also part of what just like made it very uncomfortable for audiences at the time. Like beyond just the depression and everything happening, it's interesting that, you know, that this may have been just like, you know, when someone's like, you should be angry and you're not ready to be fully like freaked out or angry.
Yeah,
they just weren't there yet, you know?
I am curious. I wish I could go back and just see how audience react. Could you ever see Sullivan's Travels?
No.
Preston Sturges. There's a I'm sort of spoiling it, but it's very old. Yeah. There's a part where this guy, he wants to write this movie about the working class called "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" I think that's the last time that name occurs in film. But he wants to write this movie, and he's trying to like understand the working man, and he wants to write this like sad, you know, like about like how hard it is. And then he goes and he sees a bunch of actually poor people watching a Pluto cartoon, and they're losing their shit. And I gotta say, and he sort of learns a lesson. It's like, they don't need misery porn. I should speak to people in the actual language they're speaking, you know. And I like the movie. It's a very good movie. I'm not starting beef with Preston Sturges, but I have always thought it was a little much. The shots of like these poor dirty men like laughing at a Pluto cartoon. It's like, I've seen the Pluto cartoon that they're watching in that movie, and it's like, it's pretty funny. I give it like a 3 out of 5 stars, you know, like I definitely wasn't on the verge of tears laughing as these men are. And it's like, I know things were bad, but I don't think they were so bad that like, God, if I don't laugh at Pluto, I'm going to kill myself. I don't think it was that bad.
Yeah, definitely a bit reductive, but I think you're right in that it speaks to, I'm sure, like the level of escapism that people were looking for back then.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if people in seeing this movie at this time, although I guess it came out near the end of the year, but still, I'm wondering if watching a story about a country going off the rails and falling into bankruptcy like just wasn't what people were looking for at the time. It just was a little too close to home in terms of like what was actually happening, even though, as we are saying, the plot is like basically just window dressing.
Yeah.
The first scene of the movie is like, Fredonia is going bankrupt. Everything's going to shit. We have nothing. We have no idea what to fucking do. So like with that as your jumping off point, I could imagine being in 1933 and being like, oh God, I just wanted to get away from this shit for a second.
Yeah. And you know, looking at the box office, I think that probably is what happened. I can't imagine the beginning of this movie being just interchangeable with like the newsreels that were playing before it of just like,
right.
You're like, great news, America's even more bankrupt than before somehow.
Yeah, no, truly. And while like I understand the like validation feelings of hope, I have kind of appreciated that it doesn't have the silver line. Like there is no the tramp going off into the sun with like Charlie Chaplin. Like I was fucking depressed. To me, it's like a warning, you know? So like it's like a wake up call. You could look at it as a read of like it's the lunacy of what occurs if you don't wake up to reality. And like all the people of Fredonia are batshit, you know, like they're not they're just so bought into like the nationalism and the patriotism that it's like they're like you said, they're not like, who the fuck is this dude? They're just kind of like, rich lady said he's the new boss, we love our country.
That is one thing that I really wanted them to unpack. And I know that this not the story that they're telling, but I was like, why Rufus T. Firefly? Like, why this guy?
Because she wants to fuck him.
Is that
There's like nothing more to it than that. She just like wants to fuck this weird looking guy who hates her. And never stops saying to her face, he's like, hey, there's like a million jokes in there. Like,
so
I could have sex with you, but I'd rather get kicked in the head by an elephant. Like, he's just like, I would rather God come down from heaven with a gun and shoot me in the head than even kiss you. And she's like, what a charming man. Like, that's it. That's the entirety of it. Is she's like, yeah, Rufus T. I've been hearing that this guy lays pipe. I'm going to restructure the entire country so he can be in charge.
And then, I mean, I did like, as soon as he finds out that he's rich, you know, like changes his tune immediately. He's like, darling, I love you.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
I like to think, though, the power that she has as a straight man, and you brought up the actress, like she's in all their movies, right? And she's
Mostly,
so powerful. And I had read that Margot Dumont was like people back in the day, or I'd heard this on another podcast, like people back in the day actually thought she was the actress herself, didn't get the jokes.
Which is insane.
Which is insane, but like that's how in the bit, because you know how Groucho never broke character really, but like that she didn't really break character either as the straight, and so people are like, she just doesn't get it. Like she just like keeps doing these movies and like the butt, which is insane. But she had to like come out and say, no, I fucking get it. Like it's called acting.
Groucho, who I love, he did her no favors by after she died being like, no, she didn't get any of the like, what a fucking nasty thing to do.
He just didn't drop the bit. But I like to think this maybe is me romanticizing it, but that she was like, would have enjoyed that. That maybe even though she was the straight woman, that she, in order to play into that, there is almost an anarchy in itself to be like, I'm so committed to the bit.
Oh, yeah.
I know the role I'm playing, but like there is that she would maybe appreciate, like, keep it going.
She rocks.
You know?
I'm with you on that. She's great. She's an incredible straight man. That is a very like people didn't know. You know, it's like every time there's a new technology, we just sort of have to go to war for 100 years. You know, it's like we've invented the printing press. Sorry, everything else, we gotta go to war. Everyone went insane. Now we can read books. No, too crazy. We gotta go to war. Movies are the same way. It's like there's people moving up there. People didn't understand. It's like somebody wrote that, somebody directed it. They put the camera. They were just like, those Marx Brothers sure are crazy. That woman, they're really like they're watching like Windy City Heat or something. Or like they've tricked this woman. It's so stupid that the idea that she wouldn't have been in on it.
I was going to say that exact same thing. I attribute that confusion to just like early 20th century audiences thinking that everything they saw in a movie was actually happening. Like the people who saw that train coming at them and all ran out of the theater because they're like, there's a train that's about to hit us.
Oh my gosh. Or the dog on his tattoo. That was a fun bit. The dog.
That's a great. That's like that bit in 2024. I think would really work well. And there's a lot of jokes in that that are like, I don't know. They sort of. There's no open by date on some of these jokes. Some of them, there's a very
Some of them, absolutely.
Yeah,
some of them.
There's one in particular that gets cut from syndication a lot.
I mean, when Chico and Harpo show up for the first time and they're in disguise, and then they take off their disguises, and then Chico turns Harpo around, you realize he's not even facing that direction. I did laugh out loud. I was like, that's fucking great blocking right there.
That's so good. And those two in particular, because Groucho's got more of the verbal comedy, but those two in particular, they have some like surrealist jokes. You know, they've got some stuff that like later in like the 60s, like Albert Brooks sort of like anti-comedy. They're doing that already in the early 30s, you know, like they're already like, this is a very abstract, but one of the first jokes most children learn is, why did the chicken cross the road to get to the other side? Which is like, that can't be the first. You can't have an anti-joke be the first joke. They don't know what they're riffing. It's like when kids see Shrek before they've read a fairy tale. It's like, but they're riffing. You don't know what they're riffing on yet, you know? And so like at that era, it's like, oh my God, we're already riffing on the idea of jokes. That's great. Anyway, love it.
Wow, you just fucked me up with that a little bit, Branson. Because I just feel like, yeah, that's like so much of what's wrong with us. It's like we had an anti-joke before we understood what a joke was.
I think we could solve all problems if we just a simple fucking knock-knock joke, and then why did the chicken cross the road?
I kind of like the idea of you as like a character or a ghost that just like comes in disrupting childhoods, like a kid's about, and you're like, don't tell that joke yet. I gotta teach you one first.
A ghost? I'm dead in this scenario.
Yeah, how
what
else
an
are you gonna
uncharitable read of what you said.
There was something else that I kind of picked up in their performances, specifically in Groucho's. And Branson, maybe you can speak to more of this, but I felt like he was also riffing on, I don't know, like an early 20th century machismo of, you know, like I'm this boisterous, horny guy for the most part, other than Mrs. Teasdale. And, you know, like when other men come in, like when other men show up, I'm going to try to out alpha them. And when hot women are around, I'm going to try to fuck them with my words. And I'm not like, is that something that is thematic throughout most of the Marx Brothers movies, or is that something that is kind of more localized to this one? But like, it felt like there was a commentary on like this like alpha guy energy, but in the most ridiculous way possible, played by a man with, you know, like a grease mustache painted on his face.
Oh yeah, that is a constant thread throughout all of Groucho in particular stuff, and it comes from two things. One is just like, in order to like have plots in these institutions, they usually need somebody to play the highest status guy or the highest ranking guy in these institutions, and Groucho's a natural for that. You know, he is a high status character. It makes a lot of sense to put him there, and then to have him have this attitude, which is like, it's both a high status and a low status attitude at the same time. It's sort of like, he's almost like got a pipsqueaks energy, you know? He's got like a little Napoleon thing going on. And part of it, though, is because they come from this vaudeville tradition where a lot of their early act was them doing like ethnic caricatures, which is like, I love a lot of vaudeville stuff, but unfortunately that's a lot of what it comes from. And Chico just kept doing it the whole time. Just well into the end of his life, he was just like, I'm an Italian guy.
Not dropping the bit. Yeah.
As soon as Italians became white, he was like, oh, we can go off on this. This is open season.
Because his main concern was like, so I can only make fun of white guys. That's definitely what like the
Yeah, he was very worried about it.
Yeah, it's like the day that happened, Chico was like, whew, like the day that like
hey boys, it's okay for me. It's okay for me to still do this. Yeah.
Oh God, close one. But also Groucho's original bit was he was playing like a German character. And a lot of the German stereotypes neatly fold onto, which is like high status, boisterous, blustery, sort of like think they're smarter than they are, you know, like a lot of that folded nicely into the Groucho persona. Just add a few jokes in there and you've got Groucho for the most part. He's playing a very sort of like German character, but he wasn't doing the voice anymore because, big surprise, after World War I and at the dawn of World War II, people weren't excited to hear a German voice on stage. And, you know, that was like...
Sure.
That was unpleasant for them.
That makes a lot of sense.
The same way you don't see Yakov Smirnov anymore. You know, he's not tearing the world up anymore with everything happening with Putin. That's why Yakov Smirnov's not number one on the comedy charts right now.
Yeah.
It was fascinating watching this, thinking about these Jewish brothers who like making this political film while not wanting to be explicitly political, but also being explicitly, it's like such a fine line, right? And Hitler's coming to power. And it just feels like you can't separate the identity of what it meant to be these Jewish brothers in Hollywood at this time, who later, like, there was like Nazi plots to murder them.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Which didn't come to fruition, but like them, Charlie Chaplin, like this is all coming to fruition, and like you said, just the power of laughing in its face. And I'm sure that context at the time was there, but to be able to look back at it and then see the power of, particularly for Groucho as Rufus T. Firefly, to just, you know, for them to all do whatever the fuck they want to this character, to this type, is really empowering and powerful. I don't know I couldn't find anything about like what Hitler would have thought, but Mussolini banned it.
Sure. Oh, wow.
Not a fan.
Well, because of Chico's accent.
He didn't like the Chico stuff. Yeah.
It wasn't the critique of fascism.
We were both chariots of fire as we both ran for that joke. I feel pretty confident speculating that Hitler didn't like duck soup if he saw it.
Yeah.
I compare this movie to like speaking of Chaplin, The Great Dictator, which very good movie. I think duck soup blows it out of the water though, because it's very much, I think The Great Dictator has the pitfall that I think a lot of political comedy has, which is let's laugh specifically at a clown, like a guy. Like, let's laugh at like Drump for whatever, you know, like the Cheeto in chief. Like, let's laugh at him. And in doing so, we'll feel this catharsis and like we did something.
Oh, yeah.
And then that's fucking, you know, it doesn't do anything. Meanwhile, to me, duck soup feels a little bit more, and that, you know, it's again, a bit of a stretch. It feels at least a little bit more, though, like a call to arms.
Yes.
No one specifically is being called. It's more of just like the milieu of what's happening right now. And so no specific guy is being called out, but it's more like, I can imagine watching this movie and being like, hey, that was fucked up. everything is, it would then stand to follow, everything is fucked up. Like, we might want to do something about this. Whereas The Great Dictator is one that I still don't, I mean, I like it, but I don't, it's a complicated, like, what I don't like about it is it feels very much to me like very 2017 making fun of Trump. Like, that guy's got small hands. Maybe if you say that enough, he'll stop being president in shame or something, like it's not gonna, it doesn't do anything.
Yeah, it's like, how many times can we see a headline that's like, John Oliver destroys Trump in like every week? It's like, okay, the guy's still president. He's still here. I guess he wasn't. Something that this movie does that's really smart, speaking to exactly that point, Branson, is every time that Groucho or the other Marx Brothers choose to do something that is like what we would recognize as like very extreme, very dangerous, there's like complete buy-in by all of the people of Fredonia.
Yes.
And I guess we don't see like the regular folks of Fredonia. I guess we're only seeing kind of like Fredonia's political class. But every time, like the two main examples I'm thinking about is Groucho's first song about like everything he's going to change, which is basically like a comedic song about becoming a fascist.
Mm-hmm. It is straight up. It is a pro-fascist anthem.
Yeah.
But in quotation marks, so it's okay. But it is the line, the wait till I get through with it. He's like, I'm going to ruin your country, as they all sing for him.
That one, and then the starting the war song are like two examples where like as soon as he starts saying these things, which like we as the audience recognize as like, well, that's fascism, or that's just like unbridled war hawkism. Everyone is like, yes, this is what we want, and we will sing this joyous song. Especially during the war song, when they like just get to a point where everyone is just doing like a religious style chanting, like as they're singing about, and it's like it's like a transcendent moment that's just like, oh, war is going to solve all of our problems, and that like this. Yeah, it's like this religiosity that people feel in the idea of being on the precipice of a war. So I think you're right. I think like the commentary is more about how, like how these individuals can affect these systems, but how at the same time you need buy-in from these systems and you need them to be working in conjunction in order for terrible things to unfold.
Yeah.
The war stuff in particular towards the end, I think the movie does a very good job of not just like showing atrocities, it's just like not funny.
Yeah.
It's a comedy first, so it wouldn't be funny, but still making it, it's like, this is chaos. The movie is falling apart. They start, they have like shots of like animals charging and shit, it's just like, okay, reality is breaking down. But the thing I like in particular is every time you see the brothers, they're wearing a different army uniform. Mm-hmm. And it does seem to suggest it's like, this is a costume show for these guys, at this level where nothing is at stake. This is just like this is a series of cool hats for these guys, that's like all it is.
I was curious near the end because like the last 15 minutes, the editing style and like you're saying, the costumes and the sets just become completely frenetic, and I feel like we devolve into pure mayhem, like literally in the way that the editor has chosen to cut. Like we're getting like half insert shots of like a house falling down and like split second shots of soldiers across enemy lines shooting guns, and then like we're changing, like I feel like the camera's crossing lines over, we're like in different locations without any sort of like segue or anything. Was that intentional, or was that someone getting near to the end of the production process and being like, oh fuck, I don't know what to do with this, I guess just, I don't know, throw together the last few shots that we were able to get before we lost the budget? Like, do you have any idea about like how they constructed the final act?
I do think that was intentional. Now, I don't want to say that all of the craftsmen at Paramount at this time were putting their hearts and souls into it. Maybe there was an element of like, phew, but I do think it was a top down. Like, we want to not just have Fredonia go to war in the movie. We want to go to war with the movie that we're in right now. We're going to go to war with the audience watching this. I think that's a very intentional move. But I imagine whoever was cutting it at the time was also like, oh, thank God. I can just fucking put a shot of a dolphin in here and then it'll work. But I think, there's sort of like, they are pulling from like surrealism is like the only other like movies that were working like this at the time, like they're just putting like a comic timing on that. Yeah, I think it was intentional. But that's fine. I've never even considered that it might have just been them being like, all right, this fucking Marx Brothers movie's not going to make money. Let's stop even editing it.
No, I like the idea that it's intentional. It feels like you're meant to leave. And I loved what you were saying, Branson, about the effect is that you're so frustrated. You feel like you're one of the characters stuck in this, like the Marx Brothers are doing something to you where you leave just like, did I like that even? I'm not sure. Like, I don't even know what I'm feeling, because from the top, again, they set it up very clearly what the problem is. They're like, the problem is that there's no freedom in Fredonia, and there's one billionaire basically running the show and putting people in power. So anyways, this is what happens. Like, there's no moment of choice, which just puts the audience in such a great position. There's absolutely no catharsis. So in some ways, the effect is that you're left to feel like, fuck, that I'm going to be depressed. I'm going to be, like I said, I watched it, I'm like, I'm not happy, not LOL feeling good, like, yay, but I am feeling agitated, and it's a feeling that will last with you, and that can be really effective in terms of, like, a political movie, a political film, in some ways more effective than catharsis.
It's kind of, dare I say, Brechtian in that way.
Yeah.
It's like
definitely
Brechtian.
Ionesco, yeah.
If you're feeling, the Brecht thing, right? It's like, we don't want the audience to feel. Right? Like, if they're feeling, that's how Hitler comes, like,
yeah.
The only thing I feel watching Duck Soup is, whoa, or like I'm laughing. Like, there's no other like emotional core to it. It's a very,
is somebody gonna, no? Oh.
I guess not.
No?
And they also, I think about it a lot, like on this rewatch too. It's like, this is a movie made by, first generation Jewish immigrants, like, who are very outside in looking at American culture, right? And so there is a very like, well, fuck this vibe to all of it. And I think it's very smart and very intentional that the movie Fredonia seems to be one expensive dinner party and a cuckolded street vendor. Like, there's no other people in Fredonia. You never see like the common man other than one fucking guy who is just like harassed endlessly by Harpo.
Right. Yeah, you don't see the working class.
And I think that's intentional. I think if you did, you would very quickly, the fun of the movie would evaporate, because it's like, well, you can't. You would stop liking Groucho. You would stop liking Rufus T. Firefly. You would stop, because I certainly root for him, even as he's like destroyed. It's like, yeah, bring it down from the inside. I am rooting for him because I'm rooting for momentum when I watch a movie, for the most part, and that's what he brings.
Yeah, if you saw the harm that he was exacting on regular people, you would be like, we have to execute this man. Like Groucho, we have to, like, the actor Groucho Marx, we need to execute him.
Even just for representing it in a film, we have to kill Groucho Marx. Oh, but then we would never get Go West.
And the vibe of it, too, I think it was interesting thinking about, like, what I've always been told is, like, the legacy of Marx and the comedy of Marx and, like, modern versions of that, obviously, like Woody Allen and all that. But I was like, no, this movie felt... Yeah, the brothers. This movie felt the most... I was like, oh, this is pure Andy Kaufman. That's where that, to me, felt like this was pure Andy Kaufman. And I guess what you're saying, like, the anti-comedy aspects of it. Almost like I was like, do you want me to laugh along? Like,
I think they just don't care.
Yeah, and it's free, and there's a sort of freedom in that. In some ways, it's like, oh, you actually don't need me to, because maybe I should be more worried about the fact that, like, there's no freedom in Fredonia, and like, there's like, this is really fucked.
Well, because that as a kid I would always respond really negatively to when I could tell a movie or show needed something from me. Like when it's like, oh, it needs me to laugh. Or you're like, when you go to see like live comedy and somebody's sort of bombing and it's like, I got two options here. I can either pity laugh and force myself to have fun, or I can invent a narrative in my head about why the guy on stage is an asshole who deserves to not be laughed at. Like, that's it. That's like the two things I can do when I go see a show. And it's like, that's very stressful. And what I like about the Marx Brothers is they don't fucking care if you're having fun or not. They don't. It's like the Chuck Jones thing about like, oh, were Looney Tunes made for, I think there's a lot of obviously like spiritual overlap between the Marx Brothers and Looney Tunes. Like, were these made for adults? Were they made for children? And Chuck Jones said, adults or these were made for us. Like, these were made for the guys making them. We're not going to the theater to see if people laugh at it or not. Who cares? And that spirit is very in this. And I'm having a tough time extracting much politically from that, but I admire it.
Well, I think there's an aspiration there that that's a privilege,
Yeah.
and they found a way to get, but like, if anything's aspirational, it's like, what are the structures politically we can create that people can make things that they do because they just fucking want to do it, and they're not doing it because they need something, And I think there's something that's like, I would like to have those freedoms artistically. And there are things we can set up politically to like actually make that happen. It doesn't have to be aspirational. How do we get there? That's kind of what the question poses.
That's good. That's what I should have said. That's very good.
Well, this was collaborative, Branson. We did it together.
We got there.
But you're right. There is a reckless abandon to their comedy style and their storytelling that is it's very impressive. And it's like, as an artist, it's I'm always impressed by people. I'm like, damn, you just didn't give a fuck when you wrote that thing. And it's just like, it's so pure and it's so honest and it's so vulnerable that it usually ends up resonating because like you were creating it from a place with less self-consciousness. And I mean, if it's one thing you say about these guys, they are not self-conscious whatsoever about like how they look, how they sound, what they're doing, what their bodies are doing, how they're being interpreted, which is like it's very impressive.
I mean, Groucho is a guy, like, I don't think he was a bad looking guy.
No, I mean, I think they're all very hot.
They're all pretty handsome.
Yeah.
They're all pretty handsome.
But I can imagine Groucho like in front of a mirror with grease paint for the eyebrows and mustache, like just like shaking his head, like not ugly enough, like making himself look uglier, parting his hair in weird ways until he looked more like a clown. Because you see him out of makeup, it's a handsome older man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Hot. Yeah.
When they get into the mirror bit, I was like, oh damn, they're brothers. Because like as soon as Chico and Harpo I was like, oh shit, they all look exactly the same. The only signifiers are like a mustache, a hat, a honking horn. But I was like, yeah, they all look similar, and they're all like pretty good looking guys.
I think so.
Yeah.
I've never heard it expressed like that. That's so just like nakedly what's happening there. Oh yeah, they're brothers. That is the joke.
I heard that there was a fun backstage antic where I think it was Harpo who had paid one of the extras to basically talk some shit on set and just be like, this script, who wrote this? Like, who would have gotten nothing on this is funny. They should like fire the guy who got the, and like the director heard it and was like, I'm gonna punch that guy. And they're like, ha ha ha, I paid him to say that. Like, just those kind of.
What an early prank. There's no like punchline to it. It's just like, I got my friend mad at a guy who I paid.
Yeah. Yeah, but that kind of stuff where you're like, it sounds like it was a tense work environment and they're just like doing what they can to make it tenser.
I mean, what I know of I think Harpo was a good guy. I mean, I know it was bad guys, but like I know they had their struggles in their real life. And I know the Groucho persona was a little like a Venom symbiote thing for him, like. Mm-hmm. At a certain point, it stops being a persona when you can't turn it off at home alone. Like you're just Groucho at that point. You're not what's his name, Julius Marx. Anybody? You're Groucho.
It's like a little Mr. Rogers. How I imagine him.
Yeah.
It's like, turn it off, dude. And like his like in the documentary where you're like, there is a dark side to Mr. Rogers, which I'll save for a different podcast. But I have theories.
Oh, I mean, they get it. I guess in the documentary they get into it.
Yeah, a little bit. Not enough. You're like, they're holding back. I wanted more.
There's a guy who's like, oh yeah, Mr. Rogers said I couldn't come out. And then they're like, anyway, Mr. Rogers was a great guy otherwise. Like, I imagine it was a tense set. I think a lot of their sets were tense, to be honest. And Groucho was not, he had he was a husband multiple times and never really nailed it. I think it's probably the most generous way to put that. Yeah, they had their struggles, and I imagine that reflected on the set. And I know they had, if you ever read like Groucho's letters, he has so many, he was an extremely smart guy. He was an extremely well-read. There's a quote about Groucho, I forget who said it, which was just like, all these books I would hear about when I went to college, Groucho, who didn't go to college, read them. He's a very worldly guy. And he has these letters that are incredible to read, and he writes all the time. He's about like the motherfucking Paramount. They're fucking us. This guy couldn't write dog shit. Like MGM is fucking us. Like they should just let me do everything. And I think that bled into the film. Although I don't know enough to speak
Is there a famous, like, have they done a biopic of this, or?
I don't know. I don't think so. I feel like
Yeah,
I
I
would have seen
wonder-
it if they had.
Yeah.
I know, right? I'm surprised. I was surprised at how, when I was like, where's the documentary? And I couldn't find, like, there's like documentaries, but I didn't find
Yeah.
like a, like a really solid, like one that I'm like, this is, and
They
I
don't
was
have
shocked.
their Terry Zwigoff crumb. I almost called it cum. Jesus. I'm thinking about his subject matter. They're interesting because they were big in the 30s, but not that big. They were like kids liked them a lot, and then those kids got older, and then so they had this sort of second renaissance in like the 50s, and then in the 60s, because they were very anti-authoritarian, then they got popular again. But they're it's like I know we all lived in Pittsburgh, and it's like Pittsburgh's a city that like boomed at certain times and didn't boom at other times, and that's why it has like the local character it has. And the Marx Brothers are very the same way, and it's like this is not like a boom time for the Marx Brothers, and I don't know if we'll ever see one again just because it's so old now. But
Got it.
You mean like 2024, not a boom time.
not a boom time for early talky comedians.
Maybe this podcast will make it happen.
God, that would rock.
I'm
would be
sure
so
we'll
cool.
get like the Netflix or Amazon Prime miniseries that's like 6 episodes, 8 episodes on like, and it'll just be called like The Brothers or some shit like that, and it'll be fucking. I don't know. It'll be like fucking like Miles Teller as Groucho and
Oh
like
my God.
Zac Efron as Chico or
Stop.
some shit.
Stop. Oh.
It's gonna happen now because you said it too. This is a fun game to play, by the way. This is not just for anyone or you it's to piss yourself off. You pick a media property that hasn't been adapted into a movie, and then you cast it with what they would actually cast for it. And the more frustrating
Great
your
party
answers
game.
are, the more you win.
Okay, what are yours for the Marx Brothers, Branson?
Miles
Zac
Teller
Efron
is a tough
pretty.
one to beat.
Yeah.
Because it's like that's who they would put in it. That's a good question.
Oh, I got one. It's really going to piss you off.
Please.
And it's spot on. Justin Timberlake.
As who?
Wow.
They're just throwing him
As
in.
who?
Maybe Zeppo. I don't know.
Harpo.
That's Harpo.
Oh, God.
No, they give him. They're like, you are Groucho.
But no, because he can move. He's a boy band dancer. Maybe he can.
He's
be
got a
Harpo.
mustache. He
He's
has
got a
facial hair.
mustache. God. Yeah, just a fun little party game.
That's a very fun game. I'm gonna start doing that more often.
Well, speaking of Groucho's politics and letters and just kind of the person that he was, I did find a quote. I don't know if this was from a letter, where this was from, but he said about politics and art, politics is the art of looking for trouble, finding it everywhere, diagnosing it incorrectly, and applying the wrong remedies.
That's a very safe quote. I got to say, he's got better stuff than that. That's a very...
Yeah, I couldn't
You know what I mean?
find
That's a guy on Facebook, right? Like one of your dad's friends on Facebook shares that stat, and it's like, what does that mean, man?
But this is what's interesting. I felt like he had a lot of, and I wonder if there was a tension because you're saying the letters, which I couldn't find, but the things I found were somewhat safe. And when they talked about Duck Soup, like it was safe. And I think potentially I have to imagine it was like people wanted these guys murdered. Like they're doing so much riotous, pushing it stuff, but in talking about it, it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. That's not. We're just trying to make you laugh. Like that's not really about politics. With the vibe of some things,
I think that's accurate, and I think that's like, and I don't think that's wise.
I can't
'cause it's
blame
like,
them.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, I don't fucking want to know what he thought of FDR, like.
Well,
I'm
the
happy
films
not.
tell us in some ways, and it not to be in like a actor should shut the fuck up and I just want to see you act, but like in a just I can't imagine the pressure, particularly in that time, of being these famous Jewish actors and Hitler's rise, of just like damn.
Yeah, it's like I think it is just like I'd rather just see it on the screen. And I like what I see on the screen is why I say that too. If I saw bad stuff on the screen, I'd be like, oh, maybe I want to see what he says in real. But I like what it is. The other one, Horse Feathers, I think is another good one to watch because it's all about academia, which, as you guys will remember, I got kicked out of college. So that one really resonates with me. But the Groucho plays like the college president of the, like he's like the head of the
Wow,
That makes sense, yeah.
college in that one. And it's like, I can infer what I need out of that, which is like, oh, that guy also hates college. She's like, I don't know that for sure, but it's like I got what I needed out of Horse Feathers, and so it's like I'm sometimes hesitant to like dig any deeper into their politics because I like where I've got the dials in my head, you know.
Sure. And it's also not unfair, but it's you can project onto art whatever you want, and then people find justifications for things in art that are based on their own projections, you know, which is a completely unhealthy relationship with art and your own ability to think critically and process thought. So like that totally makes sense. Mindfulness, that's what I'm thinking of.
That's sort of like is SpaghettiOs my friend kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
In 2024, it just might be we might just be in such a different dimension. Like we're in such a different relation with ideas and how we connect that I don't know if I'd be down for them to make a film like this and be like, just shits and gigs, y'all. Like that would frustrate me. But I think it's just, I personally like, I like hearing a little bit, like there was an intention, backing it, owning like if there's an intention there, you know? So Groucho Marx was 81 in 1972.
Wow.
Which that just like did, like, I just sometimes those, you know, when you hear like a number and you're like, that puts things in perspective of how not long ago this was. But like for some reason I'd be like, he'd be dead by then.
Can I ask what you looked up to get that? Were you just like putting a calculator in of like birth year stuff? Like,
no, I didn't look it up. I pulled it from, I was reading, I think it was a Roger and Ebert. It was it was like a review of Duck Soup. And he had mentioned interviewing Groucho Marx in 1972 and that he was 81, and I had to pull that out. I don't think I pulled anything out, but I was just like, oh, that's messing with my time frames. I love when my time frames get messed.
Because he was like that till the end. He's got one of my favorites is he went to go see Godspell, which like that really puts him in time.
Yes,
you know?
that's crazy.
And
yes,
as the lights were going down, he shouted very loudly, "Do we know if this has a happy ending?"
God, that's so good.
That's good.
That is so good. That's a great. Perfect.
Can you fucking imagine you're like a 20-year-old actor? It's like, all right, I got your back. I got like, let's go do a Godspell to remember. Like, oh fuck, Groucho's here. We're not gonna top that.
And most people are like, who the fuck is this old man? Like in the 70s, they don't know who that guy is.
Oh, well, you know what? Then they deserve to bomb. That's fucking dude. Yeah. Eat your vegetables.
God, that's really good. I love that. That's much better than the other quote I offered. That anecdote.
No, I'm glad to hear it because it's like I think that's pretty indicative of like the sort of like I don't want to get into it attitude that I think a lot of celebrities used to have, and to be honest, a few celebrities I think could still stand to have that.
Sure. Yeah. I have the book of Groucho's letters. I was going to go through it and reference it like as I was preparing for this. I did not do that because I did not have time. So this is a useless thing for me to bring up on this podcast.
Well, you get points for having it.
I get points for having it and for thinking about doing it, for sure.
The app that tells you when to take a bathroom break during the podcast was like, okay, there's going to be a little riff about the letters. Like, that's when you can go.
All right, well, I think we've got through all of the plot of this movie, all of the 5 points of plot. So
it was the least plotty discussion we had, but it was very fun.
Truly was. So now we're going to give awards to this film. We got 3 of them, Branson. You might remember our first award is Best Politics, goes to the character with the best politics in the movie.
This is a tricky one.
Wow.
This is a hard one for this movie.
Oh, wow. Very hard.
You know, I feel like Zeppo is he's trying to keep things on track to like the limited extent that anybody does in this movie.
Yeah.
And he's not overtly calling the shots like Mrs. Teasdale. He's not, being the one who's unilaterally deciding who the next leader of a country will be. And he's not actively instigating as much chaos as the other 3 brothers. Although I don't know if chaos is necessarily, if like being chaotic necessarily means you have bad politics, because you could make an argument for one of the other brothers.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else?
If somebody had a gun to your head and said, make an argument for them, you could try.
You could.
You could try for sure. I think mine, I'll give it to, is the street vendor.
Oh, yeah.
This is just a fucking work-a-day punch clock man. He's just trying to sell his wares. He's just trying to go home and sleep with his wife. This guy's not trying to hurt anybody, except Harpo, who he wants dead.
But who is bullying him?
Yes, absolutely. He's needlessly antagonistic to a man who did nothing wrong to him.
No, that's it.
Yeah, that is it. And we didn't bring this up before when we mentioned the shopkeeper, but like that was the kind of the one running bit in the movie that I just like didn't find as funny because I was like, why are you bullying this poor man? And I get like a lot of it is just like physical comedy. Like, don't get me wrong, all of the physical comedy, like the hat switching, stealing his hat, that shit is like unbelievable comedic blocking and execution and timing and all of that. But like for the sake of this podcast, thematically, I was like, this guy's just trying to make ends meet. Stop cutting his peanuts. Stop cutting all of this stuff. Stop it.
Everything that a scissor can go through goes through in that guy's life.
I love that.
I'm very sympathetic to this. I gotta just say, I've got so many lifetime views of this movie at this point. All I can think every time he shows up is like, oh, dude, you have no idea how bad it's about to get.
You thought these guys are just a nuisance. One of them is gonna fuck your wife later.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gotta be him.
It's gotta be him.
I don't know, the animals. The animals in this have no politics, so they're neutral is like as good as it gets.
Yeah. All right. Our next award is then also going to be tough because I think, well, no, we'll see. But this is worst politics. Goes to the character in this movie with the worst politics.
Crowded Field.
Yeah, but I do think it's Teasdale.
Oh.
Because I just think it's like it all comes back to, I think, for what she represents being like the moneyed interest. You know, to me, she's the closest to, like, I guess I identified that as modern day. Like, she's the CEO of a corporation and felt very like could be succession. This is like this is the behind the scenes that no one sees, but you're like, oh, corporations own every leader and everyone else is a figurehead.
Yeah. That's a good one. I am going to go with Groucho because he sings a song about being a fascist and then starts a needless war. So if we're just going by, if we're following to the letter, the spirit of this award of politics, that's as bad of politics as I think you can get.
I think I gotta go, and I gotta say it's like you're both right, you know, like this movie is a parade of people making the wrong decisions, like with escalatingly large like ramifications. I think I'm gonna give it to Groucho because, and here's why. And I'm with you. I do think Margaret Dumas, what she does is like fundamentally undemocratic and like tyrannical. And it's that it comes from like a place of like sex is like so just like nakedly like just like she's only thinking about herself in that moment. And like that's so fucked up. But I gotta say, Groucho goes above and beyond what the worst case scenario she could have imagined was. Like he's like an innovator in the field of fucking up that country. And I think it's like a tip of the cap from Branson. Like that's a generational talent we're seeing there for bad politics.
But this is a super interesting tension because I think it's a lot of the conversation that happens in politics now and like is going to be happening as we get towards the election is like, is it like getting how much of the, you know, Trump as a, like Trump is clearly the firefly and how how it is to be like, well, the problem is let's exterminate Trump. But if there's always a Teasdale, there will always be that she's the one who put in power Trump, you know, like in Firefly. Yeah. And so it feels like, and to me, again, the movie was like, we laid it out for you at the top, and now this whole movie is going to be a distraction about Firefly. And you're going to be frustrated to no ends, and you're going to see where it goes. Like, it's going to go to anarchy. It's going to go to chaos. It's going to be ridiculous. But, like, if you were paying any attention, revolt against Teasdale, you know, which is what my argument would just be.
I'm so torn because you're both making these takes, and like I feel like you just held a mirror up to me and I looked in and I saw Deborah Messing. I feel like a resistance lib guy now being like, Trump is the problem. Like, fuck, you're right. As long as there's Teasdales, there's gonna be more Fireflies. Like, fuck, I don't know.
Yeah, if it's any consolation, Rivka did just win me to her side of the argument, so it's a 2-1, lights out.
Who did you see in the mirror, Frank?
No, I just like I thought that was just like top tier analysis. You know, you really zoomed out, and it was like an intersectional view of how these systems interlock and reinforce one another, and honestly, like very on brand with what we do on this podcast. So just you just won me. You won me your cause. Yeah.
You know what though? I'm gonna play the meta here. I'm playing the game.
Play the Deborah.
I'm playing the team, not the game. I'm going to stick with Rufus just because I don't think it should be a 3-0 blowout. I think he deserves special mention.
And you're right. It's like, that's why it's not an easy, but I do think that there's clearly this dialectic, right, that's playing between the fact that we're like, and I don't know where it leaves us politically. Like, it is, I'm still struggle with it daily when I'm like, the system, we have to change the system, but also, like, it's true. Trump is a fucking monster, and like what he has created, what they put in place and got the ball rolling may have even gotten out of the Teasdale's hands. Like, it's so hard to know. I think I still gear towards, like, no, we have to change. It's the CEOs. It's the, like, they'll put in place a Clinton or a Trump, but it's so tricky. So this movie really gets at that dynamic, which is...
Yeah, who'd have thought?
What a great pick.
Great pick, Riv. Great pick.
What a well-picked movie.
Yeah. I know it back, like, the inside of my hand. Is that the phrase? The outside of my hand.
The inside of my hand, the tendons and blood vessels.
The tendons. No, I guess it's the outside of my hand. All right, our final award should be a little more fun.
I've been having
a blast. What are you kidding me?
No, I know. It's just that
fun.
question. I just got, like, thinking about the realities of, like, what's coming up. I just had that moment where I'm like, oh my God, I really don't know. Like, it's such a fucking...
Oh, I mean, but you're hosting a movies versus capitalism podcast. That's gotta come with the territory.
Yeah. Okay, our final award is Best Supporting Character or Spin-off. Goes to the supporting character that this movie should actually be about, or maybe a spin-off film movie you would like to see.
This is tough because just by dint of, like, how the Marx Brothers tell their stories, every other supporting character is completely uninteresting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, they're not even one-dimensional.
Like, no one's offering anything that I'm interested in, like, pursuing, like, narratively.
Shout out to Raquel Torres, who plays Vera Marcal, because I thought she was, first of all, the costumes were amazing. I just thought it was nice to see a Latina woman, like, doing her thing in the 30s. I will say it didn't feel like that character was, like, she didn't feel like she was being pitted as any butt of a joke, which would have been, I felt easy. So. And I just thought she was iconic. And it was so nice. This was also one of these, this movie was, like, pre-Code, right? So it was, like, still in that area where, like, pre-Hays Code. So it was, like, they could still be getting away with a lot of raunchy stuff, and including the costume, including just the sexuality. It was like,
oh yeah,
all of that.
I mean, if you look at post-Hays Code Marx Brothers, that code was not kind to them. It's a lot of them showing up and, like, helping people. It's like, oh, Jesus. Just kill them. Good God.
Wow.
Yeah, the movie, I mean, a lot of the humor towards the, more traditionally attractive women in this film is very much like, oh, there's a busty lady, we're gonna be, like, kind of horny now, which you don't, like, love to see. But it also, I didn't feel like they pushed it too far at any point where I was like,
well, your point about parodying the machismo, it was like they were parodying the patriarchy, so you felt like I really did feel like they were the butt of the joke.
Yeah.
So it didn't, which people then try to do, and you're like, you got it wrong, and you didn't do what they did, now you're just a fucking dick. Like Rat Race, like all these 90s movies that I'm like, I think you think you're, like, doing some kind of, like, Marx Brothers absurdist wild thing, but you're just being, like, brutally sexist and racist and not funny, you know?
Exactly.
Oh my God, I terrified to go back and rewatch Rat Race now.
Oh boy, Branson.
Oh, we had a great episode on Rat Race, and
I gotta listen.
You're gonna want to rewatch.
I'm gonna want to. I did just rewatch. The original Rat Race. It's a Mad World.
I haven't seen that since high school. Is it good? I don't remember it at all.
That movie is 200 minutes long. There is a great 30-minute movie in there somewhere.
Oh, wow. Well, Rat Race wasn't. How long was Rat Race? Not sure. It's epic. You gotta rewatch, Branson.
I'm definitely gonna rewatch Rat Race. I remember Lovitz being great. Well, before I say that on mic, I should go, but I already did, so I should go back and rewatch.
No, we're holding that to you. You're standing for John Lovitz. He can refer back to this.
You know what? I would watch a movie of I would watch Duck Soup, but the working class in Fredonia. It might not even be a comedy. Like, just like them having to deal with the real consequences of this. Like, they could cut back and forth, but like, what is going on there?
Yeah, something like The Bicycle Thieves, just like set in Fredonia. It's like, by the way, meanwhile, this is happening to normal people.
Yeah.
It's like very funny. Yeah, I mean, it's like this is a cheat. It's like, maybe I'd see one focused on Harpo and Chico. But it is, I mean, they're major characters in the movie, but rather than following Groucho, it's just like, I don't know. I think this is one where they got the dials right. This is following who I want to follow, but that's tricky. I think that's, yeah.
Yeah. Like them doing like espionage as these like would-be spies. Like I would watch a whole movie of that, of them just like trying to like sneak into places, fucking it up, dressing up like one another. Like all that shit was great. I would continue.
Well, Frank,
with that.
I got a movie for you called Spies Like Us, and it sucks.
The only last one I would say is like I would watch a version of the shopkeeper's story, but that is told as a tragedy about how these men entered and ruined his life and just destroyed it.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's funny too. It's like the more tragic you play it, the funnier that would be too. Just like knowing the premise. Yeah.
I feel like that'd be a great you could like kill as a one person play. Branson, you should consider it. Just like a one person like that's the whole bit.
That's very. What's the book Grendel? It's like written from Beowulf from Grendel's perspective.
Yeah. Or like a Rosencrantz
like
and Guildenstern are dead type of situation.
Yes,
A
totally.
fucking shopkeep in a Marx Brothers movie.
That's how you bring it back in 2024.
Now we're talking.
That's the Renaissance.
That's basically we're printing money.
Branson, this was awesome. Thank you so much for picking this movie.
My pleasure.
I'll be honest, I was skeptical. And even before we started recording, I was skeptical. But thank you for extrapolating this, because it really, and this is why I love, like having guests come on, choose movies that they are passionate about and have like, if not a unique, but like a very specific point of view about things, because sometimes we get into these conversations, I'm like, I don't know what the fuck we're going to talk about. And then we get to hear you talk about this like so impassionedly and so knowledgeably, where I'm like, oh, fuck, you're right. There's so much stuff here. Yeah. So thank you.
Of course.
Branson, before we go, the last thing, we like to ask people how they try to practice their values in their day-to-day lives. So is there one anti-capitalist thing that you do, if it's an organization you work with or like a practice you engage in? I think last time you said like, I've been practicing guitar and I'm never going to be good and who cares? I think that was your answer.
Oh, I do. I don't remember saying that, but that sounds like me. And I do believe like having a skill. I'll say that. I'll say this again. And I feel this way with my own art that I make. Having a skill that you never get good at, and I mean, whatever quotation marks around it, like that is really just for you, and that is not something that you are commodify or that you're getting good at to commodify or to sell back or to achieve some sort of like success metric that's entirely outside of you, external. I think that is extremely worthwhile, and like as long as we're doing that, we're living. And that's, I feel so vulnerable being like that sincere about it, but like that's, I feel very strongly about that. Like make art that sucks and who cares?
Make art that's yours.
Yeah. I think I love that. It comes full circle to the hope that we found at the kernel of this film, which is that we're aspiring to make conditions in this world so that, that's an anti-capitalist value. But it does take, like, we're not all there, we're fighting for that all the time, even in our own lives, like set up conditions so we can just really mentally get to the place to be like, right, no, fuck it. Let me be able to make art from it. Let me do something, because not everything has to be commodified or be towards productivity or my career. So I think it's great.
Oh, you know what I did recently? And I'll say it and cut it if it's weird. Somebody was being annoying online. I saw somebody being really fucking annoying, and I was like, I fucking hate you. And I clicked at their profile, and they had a GoFundMe. And there's like a little angel appeared on my shoulder and was just like, just donate to it and you won't be mad at that guy anymore. And he had been injured, I was like, well, that's probably why he was being annoying. Like, I'm so annoying when I'm in pain. Like, I think, I don't know. I like that. Think sending solidarity to people who you don't like and that maybe even politically don't agree with you, I think that's a good practice.
Yeah, that's good.
A very
that's
good
beautiful.
One.
That's I thought you were gonna say, I went to Godspell and heckled the actors.
God, fucking watch it. If you're a production of Godspell coming through my neighborhood, watch out. I've got an old riff to shout at you.
Branson, it's always such a joy seeing you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, really. So fun.
Guys, this was so fun. Always a pleasure.
Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And if you want to support this show and get access to our Patreon episodes, the link is in the episode description in your podcast player, or you can go to mvcpod.com.
For next week, I'm very happy to announce that we'll be watching the 1995 erotic thriller Showgirls.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.